My name is Claudette Williams, and I've spent 42 years learning that the most difficult act of love is knowing when to say no. I'm 64 years old. I was born in Mobile, Alabama, raised in Detroit, and I've built a life that looks nothing like what anyone expected from me, especially not my family. I'm a therapist, not the kind with an office in a fancy building downtown with leather chairs and abstract art on the walls, though I could have that if I wanted. I run a community mental health center on the east side of Detroit. We serve people who can't afford the fancy office, people who don't have insurance, people who work 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet, people who need help but don't know where to find it, or who've been turned away from other places because they couldn't pay. This work saved my life, and it's cost me everything. Let me back up, because you need to understand where I came from to understand why this story matters. I grew up in a house with 7 people and 2 bedrooms. My father worked at the Ford plant until the day his back gave out. My mother cleaned houses for white families in the suburbs and came home so tired she could barely stand. We didn't have much, but we had something that mattered more than money. We had each other. Or at least that's what I thought growing up. I was the oldest of 5 children. That meant I was the responsible one, the one who made sure everyone did their homework, the one who cooked dinner when Mama was working late, the one who held the family together when Daddy's drinking got bad after the plant closed. Nobody asked me if I wanted that role. It just became mine because I was born first. I was smart, really smart. Teachers noticed. They pushed me to apply to college, even though nobody in my family had gone beyond high school. I got accepted to Wayne State University with a full scholarship. The day that letter came, my mother cried tears of joy. My father didn't say much, but I saw the pride in his eyes. But my sister Diane, she was 5 years younger than me. She looked at me differently that day, like I'd betrayed her somehow by succeeding. I studied psychology because I wanted to understand people. I wanted to understand why my father drank, why my mother stayed, why some people in our neighborhood made it out and others didn't. I wanted answers to questions nobody in my family wanted to ask. By the time I graduated, I knew I wanted to be a therapist, but not the kind who worked in private practice, serving people who had good insurance and disposable income. I wanted to serve people like my family, people who needed help but couldn't afford it, people who'd been told their whole lives that therapy was for other people, not for us. So I went to graduate school, got my master's in social work, took out loans that felt impossible, worked nights at a crisis hotline to pay rent. And through it all, my family watched with this mixture of pride and resentment that I couldn't quite understand. When I finally opened my community mental health center 23 years ago, it was the proudest moment of my life. A storefront on the east side, nothing fancy, but it was mine. It was a place where people could come and be seen, be heard, get help without being judged for their zip code or their bank account. My family came to the opening. My mother was so proud she took pictures with everyone. My father shook hands with every person who walked through the door. And Diane brought her family, her husband, Marcus, who'd made it big in real estate, her 2 children, including Tanya, who was just 5 years old at the time. "This is what Auntie built," Diane told Tanya, holding her hand. "Remember this. Remember that if you work hard, you can build something too." I remember looking at little Tanya that day, her big brown eyes taking everything in, and thinking, maybe she'll understand. Maybe she'll see what I'm doing and why it matters. Fast forward 20 years. Tanya graduated from college with honors. She'd gone to law school because her mother pushed her toward something stable and lucrative. But halfway through her second year, she called me crying. "Auntie Claudette," she said, her voice breaking, "I can't do this anymore. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but every day I sit in these classes, learning how to argue and win, and all I can think about is how much I want to. I help people, really help them. Not just represent them, but understand them. We talked for 3 hours that night. I told her about my own journey, about how I'd chosen psychology over something more practical, more prestigious, because I needed to do work that felt meaningful. She listened, like I was handing her a map to a place she'd been trying to find. "I want to do what you do," she said finally. "I want to be a therapist." My heart swelled. Here was my niece, brilliant and ambitious, choosing the path I'd chosen, choosing service over status, choosing meaning over money. "Then do it," I told her. "I'll help you however I can," and I did. I wrote her recommendation letters for social work programs. I introduced her to mentors in the field. I brought her to conferences. I let her shadow me at the center during her summer breaks. I believed in her, completely. She got accepted to the University of Michigan School of Social Work, one of the best programs in the country. Diane called me in tears, happy tears, this time. "Thank you, Claudette," she said. "Thank you for showing Tanya that she could do something meaningful with her life." For once, my sister and I were on the same page. For once, my sacrifice all those years building the center, working long hours, missing family events because I was with clients, felt like it had mattered to my family. But that feeling didn't last long. Tanya graduated with her master's degree 3 years ago. She was 28, full of passion and ideas, and she wanted to work at my center. Not just work there, she wanted to eventually take it over. At first, I was flattered. My niece wanted to carry on my legacy. She wanted to continue the work I'd started. What could be wrong with that? So, I hired her. Full-time position, competitive salary, benefits, the whole package. And for the first year, it was genuinely wonderful. She was good at the work, really good. She had natural empathy, the kind you can't teach. She connected with clients. She brought fresh energy to the team. But then the suggestions started. "Auntie," she'd say during our weekly supervision meetings, "have you thought about expanding our services? Maybe adding group therapy programs or partnering with wellness coaches?" "We do have group therapy," I'd remind her gently. "We've had it for 15 years. "I mean different kinds of groups," she'd say, pulling up something on her laptop, "like mindfulness-based, stress reduction, or yoga therapy, things that appeal to a broader demographic." Broader demographic. That phrase started appearing more and more. Then came the conversations about the sliding scale fee structure. "Auntie, I've been looking at our finances," Tanya said one afternoon, spreading printouts across my desk. "We're barely breaking even most months. If we adjusted the sliding scale, required a minimum fee even for low-income clients, we could actually build a financial cushion. The people we serve can't afford a minimum fee," I said. "That's why we exist." "But we can't help anyone if we go bankrupt," she countered. "I'm just saying we need to be strategic. We need to think about sustainability." She wasn't wrong about the finances. We did run lean. We reinvested everything back into the community. But that wasn't a failure of the model, that was the point of the model. The real breaking point came about 2 years into her employment. I came into my office one Monday morning and found Tanya waiting for me with a professionally designed presentation. She'd clearly spent the weekend putting it together. Graphs, charts, mission statements, the works. "I want to show you something," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. She pulled up her presentation and walked me through what she called the next chapter for the center, the CRADE. Plan included moving to a different neighborhood, a gentrifying area where rent was higher, but the visibility would be better. It included raising prices significantly. It included cutting some of our core programs that served the most vulnerable populations because they weren't financially sustainable. It included rebranding us from a community mental health center to a holistic wellness enterprise. I sat there watching her present, and with every slide, I felt my stomach tighten. "Tanya," I said when she finished, "help me understand something. Who is this plan for?" "For the center," she said, confused by the question. "For our future. for making sure we can continue serving the community. But it's not the same community, I said carefully. You're proposing we move to a different neighborhood, raise our prices, and cut programs that serve our most vulnerable clients. That's not serving the community. That's abandoning it. She looked hurt. I'm trying to help us grow, Auntie. We can't keep doing things the same way forever. The world is changing. We need to change with it. Change and abandonment aren't the same thing, I said. So you don't like any of my ideas? She was getting defensive now. You're just going to shoot down everything I suggest because it's different from what you've always done? I'm saying that this center exists for a specific purpose, I said. We serve people who have nowhere else to go, people who can't afford the wellness enterprises and the boutique practices. If we become another place they can't afford, we've failed our mission. But what about my growth? She asked, and there was real emotion in her voice now. I can't grow as a therapist if I'm always working in your shadow. I need to make this place my own. I need to lead, Auntie. There it was. The real issue. This wasn't about serving the community better. This was about Tanya wanting to transform my life's work into her vision without building something of her own first. I told her I needed time to think about her proposal. What I actually did was have several long conversations with my own therapist. Yes, therapists need therapists. We can't process our own blind spots alone. She's asking you to choose between mentoring her and protecting what you've built, my therapist observed during one session. And she's framing it as love, as if saying yes to her plan is how you show you believe in and her. But what if I'm wrong, I asked. What if I'm being rigid? What if this is just my ego not wanting to let go of? Is control? Is it, my therapist asked? Or is it your integrity recognizing that this center exists to serve a specific population in a specific way, and her plan would fundamentally betray that mission? We sat with that question for a long time. I also talked to my staff, quietly, one-on-one. Without mentioning Tanya's proposal specifically, I asked them why they thought the center mattered, why they'd chosen to work here instead of somewhere that paid better. Every single person said the same thing. Because we serve people others won't serve. Because we don't turn people away. Because we remember where we came from. That's when I knew what I had to do. I called a family meeting. Me, Tanya, and Diane. I wanted Diane there because I knew this would affect our family dynamics, and I wanted to be transparent about my reasoning. We met at the center after hours on a Friday. I'd prepared carefully, not just emotionally, but with documentation, financial records showing how our current model sustained itself, client testimonials explaining what the center meant to them, data on how many people we'd served who had nowhere else to go. I love you, Tanya, I started. I need you to hear that before I say anything else. But I need to be honest with you in a way that actually honors both of us. I explained why I couldn't support her proposal, not because her ideas weren't smart or strategic, but because they fundamentally changed who we were and who we served. This center isn't just a business, I said. It's a promise to people who've been turned away from every other door they've knocked on. If I let us become another place they can't access, I've broken that promise. Diane jumped in immediately. Claudette, that's not fair. Tanya is trying to ensure the center survives. She's thinking about the future. She's thinking about a different future than the one this center was built for, I said, and there's nothing wrong with her vision. It's just not this center's vision. So what are you saying? Tanya asked, her voice tight. That you don't trust me to run this place? I'm saying I can't hand you this center if you're going to transform it into something it was never meant to be, I said. But what I can do is help you build something new, something that reflects your vision and your values. I can mentor you through starting your own practice. I can introduce you to funders and partners. I can support you in creating something that's authentically yours. So you want me to leave? Tanya said flatly. I want you to grow, I said. And I don't think you can do that here. Not because you're not capable, but because you're trying to become me while also trying to not be me. And that's an impossible position. The silence that followed was painful. Diane looked at me like I'd slapped her daughter. After everything you said about family, after all those speeches about us supporting each other, now you're pushing Tanya out? I'm not pushing her out, I said. I'm refusing to let her erase what I've built. And I'm loving her enough to tell her the truth. She needs to build her own thing, not rebuild mine. Tanya stood up. I need to leave. She walked out, and Diane followed her, but not before giving me a look that said everything about how she thought I'd betrayed them both. I sat in my office alone that night for a long time. I cried. Not because I thought I'd made the wrong decision, but because love sometimes requires you to hurt people temporarily to protect them long term. Tanya didn't come to work the next day, or the day after that. She called that Friday and said she was taking a 2-week leave to figure things out. During those 2 weeks, I didn't reach out. I didn't try to smooth things over. I just sat with the discomfort of knowing I'd chosen my integrity over my family's immediate happiness, but I also kept working, kept seeing clients, kept running the center, because that was the promise I'd made, and I couldn't break it just because it cost me something precious. When Tanya came back, she asked to meet at a coffee shop instead of the center, neutral territory. We sat across from each other, both holding cups of coffee neither of us was drinking. I was angry, she said finally. Really angry. I felt like you didn't believe in me, like you were saying I wasn't good enough to carry on your work. That's not. Let me finish, she said, and I nodded. But then I talked to Mom, really talked to her, about why you built the center, about the people you serve, about what it would mean if we changed it the way I wanted to change it. She paused, looking down at her coffee. And I realized I wasn't trying to continue your work. I was trying to erase it and replace it with something I thought would be better. Something that would be mine. But that's not fair to you, and it's not fair to the people who depend on the center being what it is. I felt tears coming but held them back. So, what are you thinking now? I asked gently. I think I need to build my own thing, she said. Not a version of yours. Something completely different that reflects who I am and what I believe in. But I'm not ready yet. I need to work somewhere else for a while. Learn from other people. Figure out my own vision instead of trying to borrow or rebuild yours. That's very mature, I said, and I meant it. I also need to apologize, she continued. I came at you with this plan like you were standing in the way of progress, but you weren't. You were protecting something that matters. And I was too caught up in my own ambition to see that. We talked for another 2 hours. I helped her think through her options. We looked at job postings together. We talked about what kind of environment would help her grow without trying to make her into someone she wasn't. She ended up taking a position at a mental health clinic on the other side of town. Different population, different approach, but still rooted in service. It was a good fit, but the hardest part wasn't Tanya leaving the center. It was what happened with Diane. My sister didn't speak to me for 8 months. 8 months of family gatherings where she'd sit on the opposite side of the room. 8 months of her posting things on social media about family members who prioritize their work over their actual family. 8 months of feeling like I'd lost not just my niece's respect but my sister's love. But I couldn't apologize for doing what was right. I couldn't apologize for protecting the center and for being honest with Tanya about what she needed even when it hurt. Around month 6 of the silence, my mother, who was 82 at the time and still sharp as a tack, called me. Baby, she said, your sister called me crying yesterday, saying you hurt Tanya, saying you chose your work over family. I know, Mama, I said tiredly. I'd heard it all before. Let me tell you something, Mama continued. When you were Tanya's age, you came to me and told me you wanted to be a therapist. You remember what I said? You said it was a hard road, I said it was a hard road and asked if you were sure you wanted to walk it, Mama corrected. And you know, in what you told me, you said, Mama, I have to, because if I don't do this work, who will? I remembered that conversation. It had been in Mama's kitchen, late at night, after everyone else had gone to bed. You've been walking that road for 40 years now, Mama said. You built something that matters. And your midis, sister, and your niece, they love you. But they don't understand what it cost you. They see the center, but they don't see all the sacrifices you made to build it. So what do I do, Mama? You keep walking, she said simply. You love them, but you don't apologize for being who you are. And, eventually, if they love you the right way, they'll understand. Mama passed away 2 months after that conversation. Pneumonia took her quickly, and at the funeral, Diane and I stood next to each other, both crying, both grieving the woman who'd held our family together. After the service, Diane pulled me aside. I've been thinking about what Mama said to me before she died, Diane said quietly. She told me I needed to see you for who you actually are, not who I wanted you to be. What does that mean? I asked. It means I wanted you to be the successful sister who would make room for my daughter in your success, Diane said. I wanted Tanya to have an easy path because you'd already carved it out. But Mama said that's not love. That's using you. We both cried then, standing in the church parking lot, holding each other, finally being honest. I'm sorry, Diane said. I'm sorry for making you choose between your integrity and our relationship. That it wasn't fair. I'm sorry it took me so long to be honest with Tanya, I said. I should have had that conversation earlier, before she built up all these expectations. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was real, and it was a start. That was 2 years ago. Today, things look different. Tanya is thriving. She worked at that other clinic for 18 months, learned from different mentors, developed her own therapeutic style. And 6 months ago, she opened her own practice. Not a community center. A small private practice focused on young professionals navigating career transitions and identity development. It's perfect for her. It's authentically hers. She still comes to me for consultations sometimes. We have coffee once a month and talk about cases, about the field, about life. But she's not trying to be me anymore. She's being herself, and watching her flourish in her own vision has been one of the greatest joys of my life. Diane and I are close again, different than before, but maybe better, more honest, less performative. We can talk about hard things now without one of us shutting down or getting defensive. And the center? The center is still here, still serving the community, still running on a shoestring budget and an abundance of heart. Still being the place where people come when they have nowhere else to go. I'm 64 now. Eventually, I will retire. Eventually, someone will take over this center. But it won't be someone who wants to transform it into their vision. It will be someone who understands and honors what it was built to be. Because here's what I learned through all of this. Sacrifice isn't just what you do for people you love. Sometimes, sacrifice is what you refuse to do, even when refusing costs you relationships. I sacrificed a year of peace with my sister to protect the center's mission. I sacrificed the easy path of saying yes to Tanya so that she'd have the harder, better path of building something herself. I sacrificed being liked in the moment so that I could maintain my integrity for the long haul. And my family didn't understand that sacrifice at first. How could they? They saw me saying no to someone I loved, and all they could see was rejection. They couldn't see that I was saying no because I loved Tanya enough to tell her the truth, because I loved the community enough to protect what served them, because I loved myself enough to not compromise my life's work for approval. That's the thing about sacrifice that nobody tells you. The people who benefit from it often don't recognize it when it's happening. They only understand it in retrospect, when enough time has passed for them to see the fuller picture. Tanya understands now. She's told me that if I'd given her the center the way she wanted it, she would have succeeded in the short term and failed in the long term. She would have lost herself trying to be me, while also trying to not be me. She needed to build her own foundation, even though it was harder. Diane understands now. She's told me that she was projecting her own regrets onto Tanya's situation. She'd always wondered what would have happened if she'd been braver in her career choices, and she was trying to live vicariously through her daughter's relationship with my work. And I understand now that sacrifice doesn't always look noble or generous in the moment. Sometimes it looks like stubbornness. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like disappointing people you love because you love them enough to refuse them what they want in order to give them what they need. My family doesn't have to understand all of my sacrifices. They don't have to see every choice I made or every door I closed to keep the important ones open. What they do need to understand is that I made those choices with intention, with integrity, and with love, even when the love was tough, even when it looked like something else. That's what this story is really about. Not about being right or being validated, but about being willing to stand in your truth, even when the people closest to you can't see why it matters, even when they misinterpret your strength as coldness, your boundaries as rejection, your integrity as stubbornness. Because at the end of the day, the only person who has to understand your sacrifice is you. Everyone else will catch up eventually, or they won't. And either way, you'll know you lived according to your values instead of their expectations. That's the sacrifice. And it's worth it. Every difficult, lonely, misunderstood moment of it. Like this video if it touched something in you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about what it means to be human, to be family, and to choose love even when it's complicated. I'll see you next time.